Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are embarking on a truly fascinating structural journey today. We're going to examine how history is recorded and remembered by looking at two radically different types of legacies. First, we'll start with the vast, sprawling expanse of ancient globalization and exactly how that early trade flourished. And then, we're going to narrow our focus all the way down to a single, deeply personal voice echoing from a hidden room. It's a real study in contrasts, macro versus micro, and it's absolutely going to change how you think about the footprints we leave behind.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the first global network, look at how trade flourished, and dive into its global legacy. Then, we'll take a very different journey into the secret annex, and finally see how a voice survives. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The first global network, connecting China to the Mediterranean. Picture this. We are going back more than 2,000 years to the Silk Road. This was a staggering web of dirt paths and trails stretching across continents, linking civilizations that, prior to this, literally didn't even know the others existed. To really understand this network, you have to look at the sheer risk-to-reward ratio that drove these ancient merchants. I mean, they faced brutal, unforgiving deserts, navigated freezing mountains, and survived notoriously dangerous bandit territory. So, why take the risk? Because getting high-value goods like spices, gold, shimmering glass, and precious stones to distant markets meant securing an absolute fortune.
Moving on to part 2, how the trade flourished, specifically looking at maps, crops, and caravanserais.
It's one thing to have people willing to risk their lives for a fortune, right? But how did this massive, continent-spanning system actually take root and, really flourish? Well, it relied on incredibly brave individuals, like a young trader named Zhang Qian, sent by the Chinese emperor in year 1 to find allies in the West. Things didn't go as planned. He was actually captured and held prisoner for 10 years. Yet when he finally escaped and made it back in year 11, he didn't return empty-handed. No way. He brought back knowledge of new crops and the very first real maps of these routes. Without his grueling journey to map the unknown, this entire trade network simply could not have thrived.
But honestly, for this trade to truly flourish, infrastructure was just as crucial as those early maps. As the routes expanded, incredibly wealthy cities like Samarkand and Kashgar built what were called caravanserai. You can think of them kind of like ancient highway rest stops, but vastly more important. Here, traveling merchants could rest, trade stories, and exchange their goods in total safety. Without these physical safe havens, the massive boom in overland trade would have just collapsed under the weight of its own hazards.
And here's the wild part. It wasn't just physical goods being exchanged in those safe havens. Massive cultural and societal shifts literally piggybacked on these physical routes as the trade flourished. We saw the spread of profound ideas like Buddhism moving from India into China. We saw world-changing technologies like papermaking travel from China to the Middle East and eventually to Europe. And tragically, the network became so efficient that it eventually facilitated the spread of deadly diseases too, like the plague.
Which brings us to part 3. A legacy of globalization, and the lasting impact of this ancient trade.
Like all golden eras, things eventually shifted. Over time, as maritime technology got better and sea routes became faster and safer, this sprawling overland network declined. But its permanent footprint? It was already set in stone. The Silk Road was literally one of history's very first examples of globalization, permanently connecting isolated civilizations that never would have met otherwise. It is a massive, macro legacy written across thousands of miles, shaped by millions of footsteps over centuries.
All right, let's pivot to part 4, a very different journey. We are shifting from the macro to the micro.
Let's take a collective breath here. Because history isn't only made by emperors, merchants, and continent-spanning trade networks. Sometimes the most enduring legacies are forged in the smallest, most confined spaces imaginable. We're shifting from a huge macro view, connecting vast civilizations across thousands of miles, to a microscopic view, a secret room behind a bookcase hiding just 8 isolated people. We are trading the expansive, sun-scorched deserts of the Silk Road for a deeply claustrophobic, hidden space in 1942 Amsterdam.
Part 5. The Secret Annex, July 1942 in Amsterdam.
Imagine this. In July 1942, a 13-year-old Jewish girl named Anne Frank and her family were forced to make an absolutely desperate choice to escape occupying Nazi forces. To survive, they literally had to disappear from the world. They hid behind a bookcase in a secret set of rooms above her father's old office building, a space known as the Secret Annex. For over 2 years, 8 people lived in this tiny space, hardly ever able to speak above a whisper,
never stepping outside, and never even seeing the sun or feeling a single breath of fresh air.
Yet, inside that total, crushing isolation, a profound legacy was being written. In her diary, Anne documented everything. She wrote about her fears, her hopes, her arguments with her family, and her dreams of becoming a writer one day. With this striking, completely unvarnished honesty, this teenager poured out exactly what it felt like to be trapped in hiding. In a space where she couldn't use her physical voice, she poured all of her energy into her written one.
Which leads us to Part 6, A Voice Survives, exploring the enduring legacy of Anne Frank.
Now, as we know, the story of the Annex does not have a happy ending. After surviving in hiding since July 1942, the family was betrayed in August 1944. Nazi police discovered the hidden room, and all 8 people were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Tragically, Anne died in early 1945, literally just weeks before the camp where she was held was liberated by Allied forces. But there is an incredibly powerful aftermath here. Her father, Otto Frank, was the only member of the household to survive. After the war, he returned, found Anne's diary, and made the immensely brave decision to share it with the world.
And that single decision brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of one voice. Today, the diary of a young girl has been read by millions of people across the entire globe. A young girl who's trapped in a few tiny rooms, strictly forbidden to speak, ended up giving a deeply personal, enduring voice to one of history's darkest chapters. Her micro-journey achieved a macro impact, touching just as many lives, if not more, than those ancient merchants we talked about earlier.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We've looked at how sprawling trade networks flourished on the Silk Road, connecting empires, and we've looked at a hidden bookcase in Amsterdam that preserved the humanity of a single teenage girl. Both shaped our world. Both are vital parts of our human story. So, from sweeping trade routes to a single hidden diary, how will our generation's legacy be remembered? What are we building, and what are we writing down right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.